Okay, in our last session, we are going to cover a pivot table and few other topics. For this specific exercise, we will need some files. The files are from opendoors.pk, computer applications for finance, and then we go to lectures. On the lecture page, we then download the data, lecture 20 pivot tables. Okay, so right click on that and save link. Pivot tables are a great tool for creating reports and summarizing your data. So if we look at this data set, we have sales for different products and in different years and months. So the data is organized by years, by months, store, group of products, the product name, how many units were sold, and how many revenues we obtained. So let's start with very simple pivot table. We want to know how much sale was generated by this South store. So we want to know the total sales of South store. We have lots of records, and for that we can use, of course, different Excel functions, but pivot table is a very convenient and powerful tool. We'll start by clicking inside the data. If you click outside, the table is not going to be made, so click inside the data. Then we go to the insert menu, and the first icon on the insert menu is pivot table. Click on that. You are presented with a information box. You don't have to do anything with that, just go with the default options. It will create a new sheet on the Excel. So this is our new sheet, and on this sheet we have an empty placeholder for creating that table. So remember, we have three important elements of pivot table. The first important element is what should be included in the table rows. Second, what should be included in the table columns, and finally what should be in the combination of these two, means the numeric values. So these are the three important elements of a pivot table. So if I click outside the pivot table, the side menu disappears. So I click inside it and the menu appears again. So of course we want to summarize the data by stores. So variables which have many categories, they should go into rows. So stores have 5 or 6 categories. So I'm putting store in rows. So in rows, south, east, north, and west will be listed. And in the columns, we will list the total revenues. So since revenues is a single column, this is why we put them in columns. So if a variable has many categories, it should ideally go into rows. The table looks nice, otherwise it doesn't make difference whether you put the variable in row or column, just the format will change. So from here we have 4 boxes which we have to fill with some variable. The first one is filter, which we shall use later on, then columns, then rows, and then values. So in the rows I am going to put stores. So click and drag, and so you see if I release the button and drag it to the rows, we get the categories of this specific variable. So unique categories are 4, east, north, south, west. the repetitions are not shown here, so just the unique values will be shown. And for the values, if I do not select column, just I select values, so I go to revenues and add this to values, so I get the total revenues. So this is a summary table which shows that for east store we have a total sales of this much, for north this much, south this much, and west this much. So pivot table is a powerful tool for creating nice tables. If I write down the requirement of this table, so I can write create a table of total sales by this was store, and this was the requirement, and this is how we made it. Let me ask for another table. Create a table of average sales by months and stores. So this is requirement number 2. Now I want a combination of months and stores, and I want average sales. So we have to identify the key variables. First key variable is month. We want months to be shown in the table. Second key variable is the store. We want store to be shown in the table. And third key variable is the average, which we want to be shown in the table. So let's decide which variable will go where. Months have a total categories of how many? 12. And stores have a total category of 4. So in this setting it would look nice if we put months in rows. So go back to the data sheet, okay, and click inside the data, go to insert menu and click on pivot tables. We go with the default option, so click OK. So just like we decided that months should go to rows, so I am putting months in rows. Immediately we should see the months appearing in the pivot table. Here we go, and I am putting stores in columns, so we shall see columns appearing at the top. And now I need to fill the intersection of these with the sales or revenue. So I'll remember in values always the a numeric variable will go into values. So I am putting values here. Now we have a pivot table for each store, and in each month we have total sales. By default pivot table creates sum of revenues. So this is the total sales. So how do we interpret for each store? In month of January we have a sales of 416, and for January the north had sales of this and this and this. But actually in the requirement we asked for average sales, not total sales. So how do we convert the total sales into average sales? So over here, values, in the values box, if we click and expand the options, we have the value field setting. Click on that, and from there, instead of sum, we select the average statistics. So OK, and the variables automatically change. Now lots of decimal values are there. I don't like those many decimal values with the sales, so I go to the home button and I reduce few. 2 decimal points are okay. Now this is our very nicely formatted table for sales, average sales for each store in each month. Let's create one last pivot table. Where did we write? Yes, in the third sheet. Um, create a table of average units sold by years using product as a filter. Okay, so in this one, the requirement asks that there are three key variable. One is unit sold. This time we are not talking about revenues, rather it's unit sold, and the statistic is average, and the units the classification is by year, and we are using one additional variable is a filter. So let's see how do we do that. Go to again the data sheet, sheet number 1. We should be inside the data, insert pivot tables, go with the default options, and now we have a variable year, and I'll put variable year in rows. Okay, so now we have 3 years. Okay, I'm using a filter of products, so adding product to the filter, and we are interested in units sold, not in revenue. So I am taking the units variable to the value field. Okay, and that's all. Okay, now, and also we were interested in average units sold in each year, so value field setting and average. This is our average. Again, remove or decrease the decimal points, so somehow. Okay, now what does the filter mean? The filter means that currently the statistics are shown for all products. If I select, if I am interested just in few products, so I select just, let's say, this statistics should be shown for apples. Now it can show how apples are performing over the years. 2005 average sale was 726, then 755, and then 730. So there is some increase in the sales over the year. Similarly, if I am interested in another product, let's say chocolates, so filter can further help you in specifying or adding or deleting products or categories from your pivot table. Okay, so that was about pivot tables. It is not a very difficult topic, so I'm not spending much time on it. You should practice this. We'll go to our next. Our next topic is data validation. Data validation actually means restricting values that the data entry operator can enter. So we give specific a list of values within which the data operator can choose, or if we put any other value, we get an error message. So usually this type of data entry is important in survey data. So if there are certain options and the data entry operator has to choose between those options. So let's say we have some data. So let's say ID of the participant, gender, happy, overloaded, etc. So we have very limited questionnaire, and we want that the person entering the data should enter just male or female in this field, nothing else. Okay, so I can create a list of these options on a separate sheet, but we can also create this on the same data sheet. So let's say write male and female. Now I select this whole column and control and click on the first cell. So selecting on this whole column will select this column, and control click will exclude the first cell from the selection. This is necessary because if you are limiting the data to male and female, so in the first column we have written gender, which is not male and female, so you will get an error message. So I am selecting whole column but excluding the first cell. So select whole column, control click will exclude the first cell. Now I go to data and I click on the data validation. In the data validation we have several options. So by default any value is acceptable. We will change this to list, and in the list it will ask for source. So our source is male female, and OK. Now ID of the first participant is 1, and if we click, so let's say it's female, second participant was male, third participant is female, and so on. And you can also type these options if you want to type, but if you type anything else other than male female, let's say we typed males, so you get an error message. There is no option of males. So data validation is useful in limiting the options to the list that we had provided. Okay, for happy we will define a list, not happy at all. Somewhat unhappy, and then not sure, happy, and very happy. So we have 5 items in this category. So now let's click on this whole column, then control and click on the first cell. It was excluded, data validation, and then select list. It will ask for source. In the source we'll select all these options. Okay. Now your drop down is ready. Not happy at all, male, very happy, and happy, and not sure. So this is how data validation can work. Similarly, you can limit your data to specific answers. Let's say 0 and 1. You can limit your data between a specific range. You say that the value entered should be between 1 and 9. So if I select this column again, click on that, and then I go to data validation, and then I say whole number, and between, so I say 0 and 10. Okay. Now this column will get a value of 0, 1, 10, 11. No, 11 was not included in this. So if you know that the values should be between the list 1 to 9, you can put a validation check on the column. So this ends our topic of data validation.